Okay, so we're just going to jump right into it, I guess. Is that the idea here? Are you sure? I'm so new at this, so great. Please forgive me.
Not at all.
See, there's going to be an editing dream.
Yeah, it's going to be horrible.
Cut away.
Cut.
It's all right, no worry.
Hi, I'm Jason Silva, CEO of ServiceEcho, and I'm really excited today to be interviewing Jay Baer, who is a New York Times bestselling author. I'll let Jay introduce himself.
Great to be here, Jason. Thanks so much. We're here in my house. Thanks for coming down. Awesome to see you.
Really
I spend most of my time helping people gain and keep more customers, which is something that you obviously know a lot about. I write books, I give speeches, I make tequila videos. It beats working.
Yeah, definitely. So, you recently released a new book.
I did.
Called The Time to Win.
Yes.
Right? So maybe you could tell me a little bit about the book, a little bit about the framework.
Yeah.
So
I write all my books sort of with the same process, in that I work with a number of different business leaders around the world, and I try and identify kind of what their challenges are, but then interpret that through the lens of customer expectations and customer needs. What I try and find out is, what do customers want today that businesses aren't sufficiently providing? And then how do you turn that into a competitive advantage recipe for businesses to take advantage of, to differentiate amongst their competitive set, and then outperform in their marketplace? And so that's why each time I do a new project, it's rooted in research. I do significant first-party proprietary research to validate my actual ideas. Like, I don't want to be like, Jay says this is true, and then it's not actually true, right? And so I validate it with research. And in this case, what we discovered is that consumers of all kinds care about time more than ever, right? We care about our time and how we spend it more than we used to. In fact, I'll say, Jason, that time is the only resource on this planet, the only one that we actually share equally. And so what we do with that time matters. And one of the key insights in the book is that 2/3 of customers say that speed is now as important as price.
Really,
but not very many companies run their business as if that were the case.
That's very interesting. So could you give me an example, perhaps like even an example for some of our customers that are in the field service management industry?
Yeah.
Can you provide?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not field service per se, but a similar circumstance. So I got this house painted not long ago, and I got 3 bids, as you do. I put in 3 sort of online contact us form. Here's what I need, etc. First painter got back to me in 4 hours.
Right.
And said, well, obviously can't paint your house today. I can't even give you a firm bid, but based on what you told me, here's kind of sort of what I think it's going to cost. Here's what I can give you an estimate. Here's what I can do the job. Second painter contacted me in 2 days. Third painter contacted me in 13 days, at which point I'd already hired the first guy. Now, was the first one the least expensive? No, it was the most expensive. But I didn't care, because today we live in an era where we interpret speed as caring, and we interpret responsiveness as respect. Same goes for field service. And it's not just me. So in the research, we discovered that 51%, more than half of all customers, will hire whomever contacts them first, regardless of price.
Interesting.
More than half.
That's quite a bit. And so how does that actually play into maybe, let's say like a maintenance agreement? So someone that you already have a customer, but now you're trying to provide that customer service. How does time factor into that? And maybe the correlation with prices.
One of my largest clients is the largest elevator company in the world.
Okay.
Right? They operate in 200 countries, like every country. Their 94% of their profits are in service, right? All they do is field service calls. And we've been working on this exact same situation, because 85% of customers say that responsiveness is a critical factor in their loyalty.
Interesting.
Because it doesn't matter what you sell. At some point, whomever you sell to has to re-ratify that decision, right? They've got to say, do I want to keep giving Jason money? Is that every week you re-ratify, every month, every year, every quarter, every 10 years? There's a sequence in which you've got to be like, I'm in again. Yep, I'm in again. And this responsiveness equals respect is a huge part of it, right? So if somebody's like, hey, I need service, whatever that means in that industry, you've got to take the call or the email fast. You've got to say when you're going to do it. You got to show up. Like this idea that like, oh, sorry we were late, or oh, sorry it took us a while to get back to you. It is literally killing your retention rate from the inside out.
Interesting. And like, do you think as a business owner, you might be able to use that as a competitive edge and differentiator, and even maybe get more money in being able
all
to
of those are
quicker?
True. Of course, yeah. And here's the part that's challenging. when you lose business, either net new customers or retention because of responsiveness, the hard part is it's almost invisible, right? There's not any report that you can run to say, tell me all the customers we lost because we weren't fast enough. You might get a couple of anecdotal mentions, like, oh, they didn't show up on time or whatever, but it's kind of invisible, which makes it really dangerous.
Right.
So yes, there's no question that you can build a better business if you're more responsive than your competitors. And one of the best things you can do in service is offer a fast pass. It's one of the key principles in the book. So Disney sort of pioneered this years ago with the lightning lane, right? Where you could pay more and like skip the line for Space Mountain or whatever. Now I think they actually call it Fast Pass or whatever, or Disney Plus or something. But you see it increasingly. Like TSA Pre is a Fast Pass.
Okay.
But you pay more, you board the line quicker. Clear is a better version of a Fast Pass. Yes. It happened to me. So I was in Vegas giving a speech, as I am often, and I'm going to check in, and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Baer, welcome back to Caesar's Palace. It's 2:00. As you know, check-in time is at 4. You can go lose money in the casino, and we'll text you at 4 to give you some keys to the room." Or Mr. Baer, we have a new program we just rolled out. If you give us $30 additional now, we'll give you your keys. And I'm like, okay, will I lose more than $30 in 2 hours? Like, for sure I will. Like, here's my Amex, keys now, please. And it's so brilliant, right? They just offer a fast pass. The reason it works, and we actually studied this in the book, 25% of customers, okay, 1/4, will pay as much as 50% more to not wait. So you should give them that chance.
Exactly.
Right? So it doesn't matter if it's a service call, if you're running a deli, if you're running a casino. If somebody's like, hey man, my time matters so much to me, either because it does or circumstantially, I will pay more to skip the line.
Right.
You should have a skipping the line system. Now, what people always ask me, right, is, okay, well then, but if you got somebody who comes in and you put them first, isn't the guy who was first who's now second, aren't they all mad about it? Here's what you do. Okay, Jason, it's really important to you to be first. Okay, you're going to give me an extra $50 to be first. The guy who's going to be first, you call them and say, terribly sorry, we've had an emergency. We're going to bump you to second, but we're going to take $30 off your visit. Are you okay with that?
Right.
Almost always, yes. You still make 20, right? You're still profiting 20. Everybody's happy. Like, this is literally a competitive advantage that anybody can do.
That's very fascinating. So what types of systems are changing now, like maybe from a technology perspective, that are enabling these types of services? I think, what was interesting to me, especially in like the SaaS business space that we're in, churn is something that's oftenly measured.
Huge.
And we'll try to get into the data analytics. How do you think that technology is actually being used today to promote these kind of time versus price equations?
Well, the nice thing is that you can actually test it, right? Depending on how you deploy your products and services, you can actually set up and say, okay, if we do it with this amount of speed, what's the LTV, churn rate, CAC? You can use all your metrics. Or if we do it slower, what's the impact on that, right? You can actually test it in a way you couldn't in the past, which is the nice thing about being a SaaS business. I will say, though, now that we're entering this AI era, it gets really difficult, because one of the things that we don't talk about enough in terms of AI is the customer expectation curve around responsiveness and personalization is going to get bent straight upwards, right? Yeah. So you think you're doing a really good job, you think you're pretty fast, but what customers think is fast is going to continue to escalate, right? So you got to keep, this isn't a project. This isn't like, we're done being fast. Like, you've got to keep getting better, because they're going to keep expecting more. That's the hard part.
Exactly. Like, I'm just, one of the understandings from my business was initially, hailing a taxi. There was a certain amount of time that was expected to that. Either you could call ahead and it could be there sooner, or you just, play the taxi lottery, go out to the street and call it. But then when Uber came along, right, the expectation of how quickly that car would come now that it was on your phone and you could see it, kind of trickled its way into other applications.
Yeah.
You know, whether or not you're ordering food from Uber now or having these expectations.
Well, field service, right? People want to be able to, where's the truck? When are they coming? How long are they going to be? Like, and what good field service organizations do, right, is they will proactively address those customer questions, right? We're this many minutes away. You know, the technician is Bob. You know, you're going out of your way to inform customers because the uncertainty, the anxiety is what actually causes a negative customer experience.
Exactly.
You know, it's not so much they're late. Nobody wants them to be late, but it's that you don't know when they're coming.
It's expectations.
You know, it's like when you call somebody, you know, any kind of a call center now, back in the day, you're old enough to remember, like in the day, you would just be on hold and you wouldn't know how long you'd be on hold.
Right.
Because there wasn't technology to figure out how long the queue was. Like, okay, we're on hold, and it was just like smooth jazz, which is, I think, how Kenny G became famous, like only on hold.
Yeah.
And so you just hear Kenny G, and every once in a while they'd say, you should go to our website. And that was it. And you didn't know if you're going to be on hold for 2 minutes or the rest of your life. You had literally no idea. Now, of course, they say two things. First thing that they say is, and this one, I laugh about this every time. They say, calls will be answered in the order in which they were received, which I always think, what was the second choice for how calls will be answered? Like, calls will be answered on the basis of height and weight. Like, why? Like, what was the backup plan? I laugh every time. And then they say, okay, estimated wait time is 11 minutes or whatever. Or would you like us to call you back? Just that little thing changes the experience so much because you don't have that uncertainty gap anymore.
Right.
People hate to wait, clearly. I wrote a whole book about it. The thing they hate the second most right now is being underinformed because it doesn't happen very much in our lives anymore. You said the perfect example with taxis and Uber. If you ordered a taxi on the phone, they wouldn't tell you when they'd come. They just say a guy is coming someday. That's all you would know, right? And now you know, you can see the dot, right? So there's no anxiety. So one of the best things I think businesses can do in the area of experience is to just be way more proactive about how they convey information to customers throughout every node of the customer journey.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your New York Times bestseller, Talk Triggers.
Talk Triggers, look at that.
Yeah. So
alpacas and everything.
Yeah. So, you know, tell me a little bit about it. Like, give me like a really great talk trigger that you might have experienced recently.
Yeah. I mean, let me set it up.
Yeah.
So word of mouth is the best way to grow any business, right? And this has been true since a caveman sold an arrowhead to a caveman. Like, it's still true today. Despite technology and AI, word of mouth is the most cost-effective way to grow any business because it turns your customers into volunteer marketers, right? It brings your marketing cost down. But the mistake that almost every business makes is they think that competency creates conversation. And it doesn't, right? Competency is how you keep customers, right? It reduces churn. But nobody says, Jason, man, let me tell you about this experience I had last night. It was perfectly adequate. Like, nobody ever says that, right? Because it's not a story.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a story that I want to tell, and it's not a story you want to hear, right? So word of mouth is rooted in stories. And we tell stories that are based on something that happened outside our expectations. If it happens inside our expectations, it robs it of its story. So a talk trigger is defined in the book that I wrote with my good friend Daniel Lemon as an operational choice that is designed to create conversations.
Interesting.
So it's not actually marketing, it's actually ops, but it creates a huge marketing advantage. If that makes sense, right? So talk triggers can be in any industry, right? And that's what's so interesting about it is that anybody can do it. It actually works better in B2B.
Right. Okay.
Because people don't expect it. Like, you know, they think that B2B stands for business to boring, right? But you can do things that are interesting and different and unusual, and it stands out in those industries in a way that wouldn't if you were selling licorice or ice cream or whatever.
Exactly. And, you know, it's funny, like I was just thinking about this earlier today. So we were staying at the Graduate Hotel here.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are
There's a graduate case study in here.
Is there really?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And then, so there's actually those key cards, right? That maybe you want to tell a little bit about.
It's you know, what is the most like mindless, pointless, non-differentiated element of a hotel? It's the plastic cards, right? Back in the day, they would have physical keys, and some were like cool skeleton keys and all that, maybe interesting key rings. But you know, for many years now, they're just literally disposable plastic cards, right? Like, click, trash, whatever. graduate hotels are only in college towns across almost always in the US. There's one in Cambridge now in the UK. My daughter actually used to work for them, which is how I got the case study. And so in each location, the graduate is rooted in the history and the vibes of that university, right? So here in Bloomington, Indiana, big basketball school, 5 national championships. And so the hotel itself has a lot of basketball. There's actually bleachers in the lobby, and there's a basketball hoop above the reception desk. Also, there's a crossword puzzle on the floor because Will Shorts, who's the New York Times crossword puzzle editor, went to school here. Okay, yeah. There's a bunch of other like weird kind of stuff in every hotel. So the key cards in the room are actually student IDs of famous graduates of that university, right? Yeah. Which is amazing. So then you get your room key, you're like, oh, whatever. And then you're like, collect them all. It becomes like almost like baseball cards / room keys, which is something that nobody even thinks about turning into any sort of conversational element, but they do it and it costs them nothing. They're paying for room keys anyway.
And what's interesting today, like as far as the experience was concerned, even the employees that are working there. So I was on my way to checkout and I had asked about like returning the keys, and the enthusiasm in which the hotel receptionist was talking about these keys and how people collect them just also showed a level of care
and training
like that you probably wouldn't have anyways. Right. And so I think like, having that story to tell, and it carried over into the guest experience.
Yeah, and that's why it's a talk trigger, because it's not, talk triggers are almost always something that's outside your actual product or service, right? They're not in the room key business, right? Exactly. They're a hotel. Now, rooms are nice. It's in a great location. The cafe downstairs is really good. Best breakfast burrito in Bloomington, probably, right? They've got a lot of other attributes going for them, but the thing that people talk about are the room key, because it's just out here, right? And that's what makes it conversational worthy.
Like I myself am an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. Do you have any parting advice? Let's say that you have someone that has been working really hard on their business. They've been at it for 15 years, and not quite, breaking that ceiling, I guess, to get that work-life balance right, and really struggling to make their business work. What's something that it's obviously every case is difficult, but what is something that you would leave with them? Something that you would help them?
I would say this. I've started 7 businesses and advised a lot of others. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is 19 people who I've hired have now started their own companies, right? So it's like almost like a coaching tree, which is really, really gratifying. If you care about customer experience, and most good leaders do, I would tell you to first perfect your employee experience. Like, it is essentially impossible to be great at customer experience unless the experience your employees have is also great. And I actually did an analysis on this a few years ago. I actually measured companies with high net promoter score against companies that were named best places to work. And it's literally like a 1.0 correlation. It's like the same list. And that's not an accident, right? So if you want to take your CX to the next level, start with the EX, and then it will naturally follow.
Okay, Jay, so we're sitting in front of this amazing wall of tequila.
Yeah.
I was hoping that you can tell me a little bit about why your collection grew so quickly, why it's now a passion, and maybe how it relates to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it took a long time and that escalated very quickly. I've been into tequila and agave spirits for probably 25, 30 years. I grew up in Arizona, the border, and I started getting involved in that culture. So I started being interested in it a long time ago, and just over time got more and more, studied a little bit more, started going to Mexico and learning more, etc. And about 2 years ago, I sold my consulting firm, and I stopped recording my podcast, which I did every week for 10 years. Well, I've got a little time on my hands now. What I should do with that time? And instead of thinking nothing, which I probably should have done, I said, maybe I should try to make some videos about tequila and teach people something about tequila. And I'd never really done much short form content, more blogs and podcasts and books and stuff. And so I had never really done any like TikTok or Instagram Reels. And I'd be kind of interested to learn how that works too. So I started making some TikToks and Instagram Reels about tequila, and they just sucked, man. They were so bad. It was not great. Didn't perform. And I was like, But one thing I have learned being a content creator for many years is you got to stick with it, right? So it got better and I got better, and I brought my business partner on camera as well, and she's incredibly talented. And it started getting more and more popular. And then people started asking us if we could work with them and more and more. And now we're running another consulting firm. We've got 17 tequila brands as consulting clients. I get 10 bottles a week sent to me. We're traveling we were in Mexico 7 times last year to visit distilleries. It's literally like a full-time job now.
Interesting.
It's
and so for someone that doesn't know much about tequila, and I mean, it comes from the agave plant, is that right?
Yep.
What's something else that you might not know?
Well, all tequila is produced in a very small region of Mexico. It's a protected denomination of origin product, the same way that champagne is. Right? You can get sparkling wine from a lot of places, right? You can get sparkling wine from the Okanagan, but you can't get champagne unless it's from the Champagne region. Right. Tequila is the same way. You can grow an agave plant in a lot of places, but you can only make tequila in this region. It's about the size of Tennessee, the state of Tennessee. Okay. So it's not a very huge place. The other thing that's really interesting is for business folks, there's 2,000 tequila brands.
Okay.
2,000 brands. That's a really competitive market, right? And so just figuring out like what's the unique positioning, what's the unique differentiator for each of these brands is something that I spend a lot of time on, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And so the flavor profile itself, right?
Crazy different. Yeah. Every single one of these are my children, but they're all different, right? Yeah. You can see some are darker and some are lighter. That's because of the barrel aging. And so tequila, much more so than any other spirit, much more so than Canadian whiskey or American bourbon or rum or vodka or gin, has by far the broadest set of flavors. Okay. So, you can get an unaged tequila, which is more in a vodka-ish realm. And you get a very longly aged tequila, which is very much like an old Canadian whiskey or an old bourbon, and everything in between, right? So the number of sort of lanes that tequila can cover in terms of flavor profile is unprecedented, which makes it really interesting.
It's fascinating. And I love your passion for it. I mean, you can really see it shine through, especially in this collection.
Yeah. We shoot all of our videos here in the house, but here in front of the new wall of awesome. So it's fun. And the big problem was for a while, we didn't alphabetize this, and so trying to find a particular bottle for a particular video was like going spelunking through a madman's attic. And so now they're very, very assiduously alphabetized, which makes it much easier to shoot.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah.
So speaking of talk triggers, Jay, I know that you're a world-renowned speaker. And you tend to wear these like really elaborate suits, right, when you're out there. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about something?
Well, look, I mean, it would be ridiculous to write a book called Talk Triggers and not have a talk trigger, right? That would be the height of irony. So pre-pandemic, I actually don't do it anymore, but pre-pandemic, the deal was this. I still have 17 plaid suits. Okay. Always plaid suits. And I've got every color in the rainbow. So the way it would work is somebody would hire me for a presentation, and I would give them a link to a website that I built, dressjaybaer.com. And on that website are photos of every single suit that I own, all the different colors. So some people want to match their logo. Some people don't want to match their logo because the background will be the same. It'll look like I have a floating head, whatever. Some people want the audience to vote on which suit, right? Which is super fun. Yeah. So they would figure out which color they want, click, and it would actually go on my calendar automatically, so I knew what to pack. And meeting planners loved it because they were then part of the performance. They were part of the day. But then the pandemic happened, and I gained like 25 pounds, and half of those suits didn't fit anymore. So now, the new talk trigger is if I give a regular business keynote, if they want one, we will do a tequila education class and tasting at no additional charge. Oh, they like that an awful lot. Oh, for executives, best clients, sponsors, whatever. Yeah,
right. That's awesome. Yeah. So Jay, this has been really fantastic. If anyone wants to learn more about Talk Triggers or some of your upcoming books, how can they get a hold of you?
Thanks. Best place is jaybaer.com. That's the main website, BAER. jaybaer.com. My newsletter, which comes out twice a month, all about customer experience, word of mouth. There's tequila reviews, there's book reviews, there's podcast reviews, thebearfacts.com.